They told me the asylum was abandoned, but they didn't tell me what still roamed its halls. Have you ever heard of the Hollow Hill Asylum? It's one of those places locals warn you about, the kind of building that's been left to rot, filled with shadows and silence. But not everything inside is lifeless. What if I told you someone or something is still there, watching, waiting, and tending to patients that no longer exist? This is the story of my encounter with the phantom nurse. And let me warn you, by the end, you'll never look at the dark the same way again. It started as a dare. My friends and I had always been into urban exploration. Sneaking into old buildings, taking photos, feeling the rush of stepping into places no one else dared to go. Hollow Hill was supposed to be the ultimate adventure. An abandoned mental asylum, boarded up for decades, with stories of cruel doctors, unthinkable experiments, and yes, the infamous phantom nurse. The legends were vague. Some said she was a nurse who stayed behind after the asylum shut down, refusing to leave her patients. Others claimed she was a victim of the experiments herself. All I knew was that people who stepped foot inside often came out with stories, or not at all. But we didn't believe in ghosts. We laughed it off as a local scare tactic to keep teenagers out. I wish we had listened. The asylum was massive, its shadow stretching across the overgrown grass as we approached. The windows were shattered, the walls covered in graffiti. A single no trespassing sign dangled crookedly on the fence, more of a suggestion than a command. Inside, it was even worse. The smell of mildew hit us first, followed by the eerie sound of water dripping from the ceiling. Our flashlights danced across peeling paint, rusted wheelchairs, and broken gurneys. Everything about the place felt wrong. And then we found the first clue. A clipboard lying perfectly in the center of an old nurse's station. It shouldn't have been there. It looked almost new. The pages were yellowed, but the handwriting was neat, too neat, like someone had just written on it yesterday. It listed medications, patient names, and times. The last entry was from the night the asylum shut down, October 17th, 1973. We laughed nervously, passing it off as some prank left by other explorers. But the deeper we went, the harder it was to explain what we were seeing. The old patient rooms were still furnished, beds neatly made. A faint smell of antiseptic lingered, out of place in a building that had been empty for decades. And then there were the sounds. At first, we thought it was just the wind, a low hum that seemed to echo through the halls. But it didn't fade. It grew louder, rhythmic, like humming, a lullaby. "Do you hear that?" one of my friends whispered. We all nodded. The sound was coming from the end of the hallway, where the doors to the operating rooms were sealed shut. The humming stopped as we reached the double doors. They creaked open on their own. Inside, the room was pristine. Clean white walls, bright lights overhead, and a faint smell of bleach. It was like stepping into a hospital still in use. But that was impossible. And then she appeared. The nurse. She stepped out from behind a curtain, her face obscured by an old surgical mask. Her uniform was spotless, her white cap perched neatly on her head. At first, she didn't seem threatening, just out of place. "Visiting hours are over," she said, her voice soft but commanding. We froze. No one dared to speak. Her head tilted slightly, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the room. "You shouldn't be here," she continued, taking a step closer. That's when I noticed her hands. They were gloved, but blood seeped through the fabric, dripping onto the floor. One of my friends broke. He screamed, bolting for the door. But the nurse didn't react to him. Her eyes were locked on me. "You look unwell," she said, taking another step forward. "Let's get you checked out." Her hand reached for me, and in that moment, the air turned ice cold. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. And then the humming started again, louder this time, coming from every direction. Shadows moved along the walls, figures of patients writhing in unseen agony. Somehow, I broke free and ran, the others right behind me. The humming followed us, echoing through the halls. We made it outside, gasping for air. The asylum loomed behind us, silent once more. But as we turned to leave, the lights in the top floor windows flickered on, and in the glow, we saw her silhouette watching us, waiting. I never went back to Hollow Hill, but I can still hear that humming sometimes, late at night, when everything else is quiet. If you ever find yourself near an abandoned asylum, don't go inside. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Subscribe for more terrifying stories that'll keep you up at night.